She got stopped at the gates of New Haven Shooting Club, her jacket faded, her old Remington slung over one shoulder like a relic. "Private lanes aren't for strays," the clerk said, barely glancing at her. A trust fund kid smirked. "They letting in farmhands now?" She didn't say a word. She pulled out her registration pass and walked straight through the jeers, until 10 flawless shots made them all eat their words. Lainey adjusted the frayed cuffs of her father's old canvas jacket and stepped forward, her boots scuffing against the polished marble floor of the New Haven Shooting Club. The scent of leather, gun oil, and expensive cologne hung thick in the air. Around her, conversations dipped and rose like a restless sea, laughs clipped and hollow, glances quick and assessing. "Excuse me, ma'am," said a tall man in a navy blazer, stepping neatly in front of her. His gold name badge caught the overhead light, Marshall Kane, club director. Lainey paused, heart steady. She had expected this. She stood out like a smudge on a glass window. Her jacket, patched at the elbow, spoke of long winters in a house where the heater rattled but never quite warmed the bones. Her jeans were faded, her boots were scuffed. No polished monogram or whispered family name smoothed her way here. "This event is for registered competitors and members," Marshall said with a smile that never touched his eyes. His voice was velvet over steel. "I'm afraid guests are not permitted past this point." Lainey slid her callous fingers into her jacket pocket and wordlessly pulled out the registration slip, crisp, official, bearing the club's own embossed seal. She held it up without a word, steady as the barrel of a rifle. For a beat, Marshall hesitated. His smile flickered. A few nearby members, men in crisp khakis and women with diamonds winking at their throats, turned to look, sensing a disturbance in the script they all knew by heart. A murmur rose. "Someone must have made a mistake," a woman in pearls whispered to her companion, loud enough for Lainey to hear. "She's not one of us," another man said, disdain curling around the words. Lainey stood her ground. She said nothing. She wouldn't plead. She wouldn't explain that she had saved for nearly a year, working double shifts at the lumber mill, just for the entry fee. She wouldn't describe how many nights she had spent practicing in the frozen dawn with her father's battered Remington, the wood slick with frost. Instead, she simply held the slip higher, forcing Marshall to take it. A pause, then two. A drop of sweat traced a line behind his ear. Finally, with a forced clearing of his throat, he stepped aside. "Of course," he said tightly. "Right this way." Lainey walked through the open space they had carved for her, boots echoing against marble. The crowd parted, but not out of welcome, out of something colder, sharper. They watched her like she was a crack in their perfect world, an imperfection they could neither polish nor ignore. She felt their contempt like a cold wind against her skin. But inside her chest, her heart was warm. Solid. Unshaken. "Keep walking," she told herself, the words steady as a trigger pull. "Let them laugh. Let them doubt. They'll see." At the far end of the room, a cluster of competitors were lining up for the preliminary round. Polished woodstock rifles, sleek carbon fiber barrels gleamed under the lights. Beside them, Lainey's old Remington looked ancient, almost quaint. A relic. A few younger shooters snickered openly. Owen Marston, son of a major club donor, champion 3 years running, leaned against a marble pillar, his arms crossed, watching her with thinly veiled amusement. "Lost your way, sweetheart?" he called out, grinning to the cluster of rich kids around him. More laughter. Lainey felt it prickle against her skin but didn't flinch. Instead, she moved to her mark, checked her rifle, slow, methodical, reverent, and waited for the signal. Above her, the loudspeaker crackled. "First round. 10 shots. Accuracy and time." Lainey inhaled, slow and deep, feeling the familiar weight of the Remington settle against her shoulder. The battered wood, worn smooth where her father's hands had once gripped it, felt like part of her own body. The world faded to a tunnel. The laughter, the marble, the cologne, the polished guns, all of it fell away. There was only her, the rifle, and the target. Bang! The first shot rang out, sharp and clean. The room fell silent. Laney reloaded. Bang. A whisper started somewhere in the back. Someone dropped their drink. Bang. A flurry of whispers. Heads turned. Jaws slackened. Bang. The sneer on Owen Marston's face faltered. His arms uncrossed. He leaned forward, staring. Bang. Each shot landed dead center, neat holes blooming in the target like black flowers. No waver. No hesitation. Laney didn't smile. She didn't need to. When the final shot echoed off the high ceilings, she lowered her rifle, breathing steady. Around her, the air shifted, a silent gasp moving like a current through the wealthy crowd. And in that moment, Laney McCall, the girl in the frayed jacket, the girl no one wanted, became the storm they never saw coming. The final shot still hung in the charged air as Laney stepped back from the firing line. For a breathless moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The wealthy members of the New Haven Shooting Club, draped in tailored suits and designer dresses, simply stared. Then, slowly, a hand clapped. One sharp sound. Then another. It spread awkwardly at first, uncertain, like a ripple across a frozen pond. Marshal Kane, still standing stiffly near the entrance, cleared his throat and gave a brittle smile. "Impressive shooting, Miss McCall," Laney said simply, setting her rifle down with a careful, almost reverent touch. "Laney McCall," Marshall repeated, as if tasting something unfamiliar. "Well, Miss McCall, welcome to the competition." Someone at the back gave a low whistle. A murmur rose, this time tinged not with mockery but with a grudging, disbelieving respect. Laney gathered her jacket around her and turned to walk away, refusing to bask in their sudden attention. She didn't need it. She hadn't come for them. As she moved through the crowd, a few competitors stepped back without meaning to, as if giving way to something they couldn't quite name. Their eyes followed her, wide and uncertain, trying to reframe the story they'd already written about her, the story that now crumbled at their feet. All except one. Owen Marston. He didn't step back. He didn't look away. Instead, he watched her with a new expression, not amusement, not disdain, something sharper. Curiosity. A grudging spark of admiration flickered in his gray eyes, though his mouth stayed in a tight line. Laney met his gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary. She saw the wheels turning behind his carefully arranged smirk. Owen Marston wasn't used to being wrong. And he sure as hell wasn't used to being challenged. Especially not by someone like her. "Hey!" he called, falling into step beside her, as she made her way toward the equipment lockers. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Laney didn't slow her pace. "Home." "Home?" he echoed, as if she'd said Mars. "My father taught me," she said, voice even. "Out past the creek. We didn't have much else to do." Owen gave a short, surprised laugh. Not mocking this time. Almost impressed. "Well, you sure made a mess of the leaderboard. Those guys were sizing up yachts for the prize money." Laney shrugged, shifting the Remington onto her shoulder. "I'm not here for the prize." "Then what?" he pressed, jogging a step to keep up with her short, sure strides. "What's the angle?" She stopped then, turning to face him fully. Her eyes were calm, steady as they had been at the line. "To prove something," she said. "To myself." Owen opened his mouth to say something clever, probably, but nothing came out. He blinked, caught off guard. Laney gave a small, almost imperceptible smile and turned away again, disappearing into the crowd. Behind her, Owen stood for a long moment, watching the space she'd left behind. His friends jeered and laughed, trying to pull him back into their safe little circle of inherited power and practiced cruelty. But Owen barely heard them. Something about Laney McCall, with her worn boots and that battered rifle, had cracked something open in him. A door he hadn't even realized was locked. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his designer jeans, scowling at nothing in particular. The tournament wasn't over yet. And he suddenly found himself hoping, no, needing, to see more of her. The tournament pushed forward like a relentless tide. One by one, shooters stepped up to the line, polished, practiced, confident. And one by one, they crumbled. Lainey watched them without judgment. Some rushed their shots, shaken by the pressure. Some were too careful, letting hesitation steal their aim. None could match the stillness she carried inside her, a quiet forged by years of aiming at rusted cans balanced on fence posts in the raw light of dawn. By the second round, whispers followed her wherever she went. That girl again. She's just lucky. Wait till the moving targets start. Lainey heard every word, but they slid off her like rain on oiled leather. She kept her focus tight, her hands steady, her breath even. When the moving targets were unveiled, sleek discs hurtling across the field at impossible speeds, the crowd leaned forward eagerly, waiting for the upstart to fall. Lainey stepped up. Her father's voice lived in her memory, as clear as if he stood beside her. Find the rhythm, Lainey. The heart of it. Don't chase, wait for it to come to you. She waited. The first disc shot into the air like a startled bird. Bang! Shattered mid-flight. Gasps rose from the stands. Another. Then another. Lainey moved with an effortless grace that made others look mechanical. She didn't just aim, she listened. Listened to the hush before the launch, the whir of the mechanism, the crackle of wind. By the end of the round, her score stood untouched at the top. Owen Marston watched from the sidelines, arms folded tightly across his chest. He wasn't smiling now. His jaw clenched every time her bullet found its mark. And yet, buried under the competitiveness, under the wounded pride, was something stranger, a flicker of wonder. She wasn't supposed to be better than them. But she was. And not because of polish, or pedigree, or gear. Because of something no money could buy. When Lainey walked back from the field, brushing dirt from her jeans, Owen found himself stepping forward before he could think better of it. You keep surprising people, he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. Lainey tilted her head, studying him like he was just another moving target. Maybe you need better expectations, she said quietly. And for the first time in his gilded life, Owen Marston laughed, not the shallow, self-satisfied chuckle he'd perfected, but a real, startled bark of laughter that felt almost painful in its unfamiliarity. Lainey gave him a look that was half amusement, half challenge, and disappeared into the crowd again. Owen watched her go, feeling the strange, inevitable tug. Somehow he knew. The real competition hadn't even started yet. The next morning, the air around the shooting range was different, thicker, heavier, as if the ground itself held its breath. Lainey arrived early, the Remington slung over her back like a badge of honor. The field was nearly empty, save for a few groundskeepers dragging hoses across the dewy grass and a lone judge setting up the targets. She liked the quiet. It gave her time to listen, to the ground, the wind, herself. But even from across the field she could feel it. The looks. The shifting. The weight of something unspoken pressing against her back. When she reached her station, Lainey found her place marker missing. No tag. No numbered stand. She checked the next row. Then the next. Her name wasn't listed. A cold knot twisted in her stomach. She spotted Marshall Kane near the judge's tent, clipboard tucked tight against his chest like a shield. When she approached, he barely met her eyes. There's been a change, he said, voice oily smooth. A recalibration of rankings. New pairings for the semifinals. Lainey narrowed her eyes. My name? Move to Group C, he said, flipping the clipboard for show. Beginner's bracket. Provisional competitors. A thin smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Stay in your place. For a long moment, Lainey said nothing. Just stared at him, letting the silence stretch until Marshall shifted uncomfortably. Then she gave a short nod and turned away. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't argue. She would shoot. And she would win. From across the field, Owen watched it unfold. He'd seen Marshall talking to the judges the night before, seen the way the brackets were hastily redrawn after Lainey's flawless round. He knew the game. His family had played it all his life, changing the rules when the wrong person started winning. For a moment, Owen hesitated. Old instincts warred with something new, something raw and unfamiliar. Then he shoved away from the fence and strode across the field toward her. Lainey was kneeling by her rifle, checking the sight, face blank and unreadable. "They're trying to bury you," Owen said, stopping a few feet away. She didn't look up. "Let them try." There was no bitterness in her voice. No fear. Only the same quiet certainty that had unnerved him from the beginning. Owen rubbed a hand over his face. He wasn't sure what he was doing here. He wasn't sure why he cared. All he knew was that watching her stand alone against them made something twist deep in his chest. "You're gonna smoke them anyway," he said gruffly. Finally, she looked up. Her smile was small, but it cracked something wide open between them. "That's the plan," she said. And for the first time in his life, Owen Marston realized he was rooting for someone other than himself. The beginner's bracket was a joke. Everyone knew it. The competitors were young, green, or worse, privileged kids tossed into the tournament by parents who wanted to brag at dinner parties. Their shots were wild, hurried, desperate for approval. Lainey moved through them like a blade through mist. Each round, she loaded her battered rifle with the same slow, reverent precision. Each round, she waited for the beat, the hidden rhythm her father had taught her to find, and fired with a calmness that made the others seem frantic by comparison. She didn't smile when she won. She didn't gloat. She just nodded once, tucked the Remington against her shoulder, and walked off the line like it was another day cutting timber or patching the old roof. But inside, a fire built with every victory. A quiet, controlled rage that she channeled into every pull of the trigger. They had tried to humiliate her. Instead, they had forged her sharper. From the stands, Owen watched, fist shoved deep into his jacket pockets. Every time Lainey's name climbed higher on the bracket board, he felt a flash of grim satisfaction. She was doing it. Even after they threw every roadblock they could find at her, she was doing it. And somewhere along the way, his admiration stopped feeling like an inconvenience. It became something heavier. Something that made him lean forward every time she took her stance, holding his breath until the target exploded. After another flawless round, Owen found her sitting alone behind the equipment tent, polishing the worn barrel of her rifle with a soft cloth. He hesitated, then crouched beside her, trying not to spook whatever fragile peace she had built around herself. "You know," he said, voice low, "there's a lot of people here praying you fail." Lainey didn't look up. Not the first time. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "You're something else, McCall." At that, she did glance at him. Her eyes were steady, but there was a flicker of something vulnerable underneath. Not fear. Not doubt. Loneliness. It hit Owen harder than he expected. "I'm not here to make friends," she said quietly. "I just want to prove that I belong." "You already did," Owen said before he could stop himself. Lainey's hands stilled on the rifle. She studied him, as if weighing the truth of his words against the years of doors slammed in her face. Slowly, she gave a small nod. Not trust. Not yet. But something close. And for Owen, it felt like winning something far more important than any tournament. By the finals, the sun was a harsh, unblinking eye overhead. The air shimmered above the asphalt, and even the privileged few in the shaded stands fanned themselves impatiently. Lainey stood alone at the line. The final round wasn't just skill, it was endurance. A grueling test, multiple targets, unpredictable speeds, and minimal time between shots. Designed to break nerves, to shake even seasoned competitors. Across from her stood Carter Vance, a club favorite. Third-generation member. Polished, practiced, smug. He barely concealed his grin as he loaded his sleek, custom-made rifle. Marshall Kane paced behind the officials, whispering pointedly to Carter's father. Owen caught the exchange from the sidelines, and his stomach twisted. They weren't just hoping Lainey would fail now. They were planning it. The targets jerked into motion, faster, more erratic than during any other round. It was obvious to anyone paying attention, the difficulty setting had been tampered with. Lainey's first shot barely missed by a hair. A gasp rippled through the audience. She adjusted, breathing through the punch of adrenaline. Find the rhythm. Wait for it to come to you. The second shot, dead center. The third clipped the edge, but good enough. Carter was firing faster, but sloppier. His bullets nicked targets, missed cleanly, rattled the judges. Lainey gritted her teeth and kept going, shot after shot, even as sweat trickled into her eyes and the targets blurred at the edges of her vision. From the stands, Owen watched, heart hammering. This wasn't fair. This wasn't right. Before he could second-guess himself, Owen shoved through the crowd and jumped the low barrier onto the field. Voices shouted behind him. Judges turned startled. Lainey paused, lowering her rifle slightly as he jogged up to her. "You don't have to finish this," Owen said, voice rough with anger. "They rigged it. Everyone knows it." Lainey stared at him, chest rising and falling with the effort of staying calm. Her hand tightened on the Remington. "I know," she said softly. A pause. "But I finish what I start." Owen stood there, helpless, as she turned back to the line, small, battered, blazing like a star against the sky that had tried to smother her. And when she lifted her rifle and took the next shot, it rang out clear and perfect, splitting the target dead in half. The crowd erupted, some in awe, some in protest, but none could deny what they'd seen. Lainey McCall, the girl in the frayed jacket, had beaten them at their own rigged game. And Owen Marston knew, with sudden and terrifying clarity, that he wasn't just rooting for her anymore. He was falling for her. The trophy felt heavier than it looked. Lainey stood on the worn wooden podium, the late afternoon sun turning her hair into a halo of copper and gold. In her hands the silver cup gleamed, plain, unadorned, but shining like a crown in a place that had once barely let her walk through its doors. The applause was scattered. Polite from some, resentful from others. But none of it mattered. She had won. On her own terms. Marshall Kane handed her a folded certificate, an invitation to full membership at the New Haven Shooting Club. His smile was tight, brittle at the edges. A performance for the cameras flashing nearby. Lainey took it wordlessly, tucking it under her arm. She hadn't come for their acceptance, but if they were handing it to her now, it was only because they couldn't deny her anymore. At the edge of the field, Owen lingered, apart from the tight clusters of old money families and rattled board members. He caught her eye and gave the smallest, most genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. A thread of warmth stitched through her chest. Later, after the crowd began to break apart, Owen found her in the equipment shed, wrapping the Remington carefully in an old cotton cloth. "You're a damn legend now," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Lainey didn't look up. "Legends don't pay the bills." He laughed, but there was an edge of admiration there. "You're not gonna stay here, are you?" he asked, softer now. Lainey paused, considering. The club had offered her a place, but it still wasn't hers. She could feel it, the way the walls of tradition would close in, even now, even after she'd kicked them down. "No," she said finally. "I've got other plans." Owen stepped inside, closer now. Close enough that Lainey could smell the faint, clean scent of soap and gunpowder on him. "Like what?" She shrugged, folding the cloth over the rifle with slow, deliberate movements. "Teaching. Starting something for kids who don't get chances like this. Who don't have shiny rifles or last names that open doors." Owen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I want in," he said simply. Lainey looked up, surprised despite herself. "Why?" He smiled, a little crooked, a little unsure. "Because you're building something real. And I'm tired of living in a world that isn't." For the first time, the iron wall around her heart cracked, just a little. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't doing this alone anymore. The old train depot sat at the edge of town, sagging under a roofline that leaned too far west. Vines crawled up broken brick walls, and the windows gaped empty like missing teeth. It was perfect. Lainey stepped out of Owen's battered pickup and looked at the building, arms crossed over her chest. "You're sure about this?" Owen asked, slamming the truck door behind him. She nodded slowly. "It's got enough land out back for a range. And it's cheap." Owen grinned. Cheap is an understatement. The town's practically paying someone to take it. Lainey smiled, the first real one in days. She could already see it, kids laughing, targets lined up across the open yard, the air crackling with the sharp, clean sound of ambition. They spent the next week cleaning the place out. Dust thick enough to write stories in, broken glass, rusted iron beams. Neighbors watched from their porches, some shaking their heads, some whispering. A few offered help, most didn't. Lainey didn't care. Every scrape of the broom, every board nailed back into place, felt like laying down a piece of her own battered heart, and daring the world to knock it loose again. And Owen surprised her. He wasn't just some rich kid playing at charity. He hauled trash, hammered beams, worked until the sun scorched the back of his neck red. No complaints. No quitting. Late one evening, after nailing the last sheet of plywood over a broken window, they sat on the tailgate of Owen's truck, watching the stars prick holes in the purple sky. Lainey's hands were raw and blistered. Her jacket was torn at the sleeve again. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't tired. She was alive. Owen handed her a bottle of water, his fingers brushing hers in the handoff. "You ever think about how crazy this is?" he asked, voice low. Lainey took a long drink before answering. "Every minute." He smiled, not looking at her. "You still in?" She looked at the depot, silhouetted against the night, broken, battered, and stubborn as hell. "Yeah," she said. "I'm in." Owen finally turned to meet her eyes. In the soft dark, there was something there between them, something fragile and fierce. He opened his mouth to say something else, but thought better of it. Some things didn't need words. Some things were better built, like the academy they were carving out of the wreckage, one day, one broken nail at a time. The grand opening was nothing like the glossy events at the New Haven Shooting Club. There were no velvet ropes, no catered spreads. Just a few dozen folding chairs set up under the crooked awning of the old depot, a table of homemade cookies, and a lot of hope packed into worn sneakers and second-hand coats. Lainey stood by the range, hands tucked into her jacket pockets, heart hammering against her ribs. Kids lined up, faces flushed with excitement, cradling borrowed rifles that didn't match and gear stitched back together with thread and determination. Their parents stood nearby, arms crossed tight, eyes wary. These weren't families used to promises. They'd heard too many speeches and seen too little follow-through. Lainey knew that look because she wore it herself once. She glanced sideways at Owen, who adjusted a loose hinge on a target stand, pretending not to notice the nerves leaking from her. "You're gonna be fine," he murmured as he passed. "You don't know that," Lainey muttered back. Owen gave a half-smile. "Yeah, I do." The first kid up was a wiry girl named Mari. Her jacket sleeves covered half her hands, and the rifle looked almost too big for her. She bit her lip, shifting her feet awkwardly at the line. Lainey crouched beside her, speaking low enough that only Mari could hear. "Doesn't matter how fancy the gun is," Lainey said. "What matters is you. Your breath. Your focus." Mari nodded once, fiercely. Lainey stepped back. The girl squared her shoulders, lifted the rifle, unsteady but determined, and fired. The shot cracked through the cool morning air. The bullet struck just shy of center, tearing a clean hole in the target. For a second, there was silence. Then Owen whooped from behind the line, clapping loud and proud. Mari turned, blinking wide, unbelieving eyes at Lainey. Lainey just grinned and gave a small, proud nod. That was all it took. The range filled with sound, cheers, laughter, more shots. Kids lining up, slapping each other on the back, daring themselves to believe they were good enough to try. Lainey felt the tightness in her chest loosen, just a little. She caught Owen's eye across the range. They had done it. Maybe the building still leaned too much. Maybe the roof still needed patching. Maybe there were bigger battles coming. But here, in this patch of dry earth and broken dreams stitched back together by grit, something new had taken root. And no one could take that from them. Spring warmed the old depot until the cracked bricks almost seemed to glow. Every week brought new faces to the academy, Kids who had never even touched a rifle, kids who had been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, rich enough. Lainey knew their stories without asking. She taught them the way her father taught her, patient, quiet, full of belief. Word of the academy spread faster than Lainey ever expected. Local papers ran stories. Donations trickled in. Even a few of the very men who had once looked down their noses at her began to send polite inquiries. Lainey smiled when she read those emails. But she never forgot who she built this place for. One bright Saturday, after the last of the students had left and the sun dipped low behind the hills, Owen appeared with a package tucked under his arm. Lainey was sweeping out the shed, an old radio crackling low beside her. "You got a minute?" Owen asked, almost shy. Lainey leaned the broom against the wall and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Always." He stepped closer, holding the box like it was something fragile. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Lainey arched an eyebrow. "That's dangerous." Owen chuckled, but the nerves didn't leave his face. He held out the box. Inside was a rifle, sleek, modern, beautiful. But what caught her breath wasn't the shine or the craftsmanship. It was the engraving along the barrel. 2 sets of initials, LM plus OM. Side by side. Permanent. Lainey's throat tightened. She reached out, running a fingertip over the letters. Behind her, her father's old Remington leaned against the wall, still worn, still proud. A bridge from the life she had survived to the one she had built. "I thought, maybe you could have something new," Owen said. "Something that's yours." "But," he hesitated, "only if you want it." Lainey looked up at him then, really looked. The boy who once sneered at her jacket now stood here, dusty and sunburned, offering her not just a rifle but a life carved out of respect, partnership, and stubborn, bone-deep love. She set the box down gently and stepped forward, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "You're an idiot," she said, voice low. Owen's smile faltered. "Yeah?" Lainey slipped her hands into his, rough palms against rough palms. "But you're my idiot." Owen's laugh broke loose, real and raw, and he pulled her into his arms like he never planned to let go. The depot creaked in the settling heat. The old Remington leaned against the wall, watching like a proud father. And above them, the wide open American sky stretched endless and bright. Later, when Owen teased her about it, Lainey would just smile, shake her head, and say, "The main thing is always to hit the heart." And they both knew. She had made the cleanest shot of all.